Hello and welcome to another session of Karen's Colours. I'm Dr. Karen and these are my colour conversations. In this session, I'll be looking at films once again, but this time it's going to be slightly different because I intend to do a comparison between two films, one from 1939 and the other one from 2025. They are very interesting films in terms of colour and the messages that those colours bring to us. But before I begin, I would sincerely like to thank those of you who have subscribed recently. It's a great joy to see my subscription rate slowly rising. I even got a little message from YouTube telling me that they are congratulating me on getting more views. As well as that, I would sincerely like to thank those of you who've bothered to comment. It's wonderful to know that out there are people with whom I can communicate, so I'm not just having these conversations all on my own. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. If you are here as a viewer and haven't subscribed, well, you might like to, but certainly more than that, I really would appreciate it if you would join in the conversation. Let me know what you think about the things that I'm presenting. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you find them interesting enough to bother to comment at all? I'd like to know, because it's your information that will lead me through into the future of this channel. Anyway, let's begin with today's session. Well, the two films I've decided to look at in this session are The Wizard of Oz from way back when and Wicked, and looking at the two of them as a colour comparison. It's a bit different to the way I normally do things. Normally I look at one film and look at the colour messages within them. These two films have some similarities, but they also have a lot of differences in the way in which they present the individual colours. I'll be focusing on two colours specifically, but I'll also be touching very briefly on some of the others. So let's get into it, shall we? Looking firstly at The Wizard of Oz, it was created back in 1939 and it was based on a 1900 book by L. Frank Baum. The film itself won 5 Academy Awards, although it wasn't a success to begin with. It won Judy Garland's theme song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, an Oscar, and that has been her theme song throughout her entire life. I saw this film as a 5-year-old back in the 1950s on its re-release in Australia some decade or so after it was originally released. One of the things that I found truly enthralling about this film was the colour transition from its black and white beginning into full Technicolor. That was something totally novel to me, and I wonder if you can imagine a 5-year-old who had been used to seeing films and anything really in black and white, and then suddenly being immersed in this wonderful, colourful environment. The story itself stayed with me. I wasn't really wrapped in many of the songs, but I do remember the colour, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I've watched the film many times since, of course, including with my own children and grandchildren, although I must admit grandchildren aren't quite as enthralled as my children were, because grandchildren are used to colour in every aspect of their media. We certainly weren't back then. The second film, which I saw earlier this year, was a film adaptation of the first act of a 2003 stage musical of the same name. It was called Wicked. It's loosely based on Gregory Maguire's 1995 novel and has been seen as a precursor to the Wizard of Oz story. I hadn't seen the stage version and I still haven't. I was rather disappointed with the film, unfortunately. And the reason for this disappointment was that I'm not used to seeing films without a proper ending. And certainly this film, when it started off and said part 1, had me quite confused. I thought it would be part 1, part 2, part 3, or whatever, as various aspects of the film, but that's not the way it turned out. A discussion with a friend made me rethink the whole thing because I wasn't intending ever to bother to go back to see the second version. It's not out until the end of the year, but I will be watching it. I viewed this film, Wicked, Part 1, several times since then, and it has made me change my mind, particularly when I concentrated on the colour values. So now I'm awaiting the second act. But I doubt very much if it will change my mind about the way in which the colours are used. Firstly, let's examine the characters that appear in The Wizard of Oz. We have here Dorothy. She's an orphan and is the main focus of the story. Then we have some real characters doubling roles as people within the dream world of Oz. Here is Elmira Gulch, a neighbour of dubious qualities, who is transformed into the Wicked Witch of the West. Professor Marvel becomes the wizard himself. Three men who are farmhands on the farm in which Dorothy is living are Hunk, who becomes the Scarecrow, Hickory, who becomes the Tin Man, Zeke, who becomes the Cowardly Lion. And there's one other character of importance who does not appear in the real-life versions, but certainly is a major player within the land of Oz, and that is Glinda, the Good Witch of the North. In Wicked, we don't find the same sort of setup. We have a number of characters, and all of them exist within the land of Oz. There is no reality to transform from or to return to. The first of these is Elphaba. She's seen firstly as a baby, then as a child, and then later on as an adult within the film. Her sister, Nessa Rose, plays a small part. Apparently, she has a greater part to play in the second act of the film. Then we have Galinda, who is Elphaba's frenemy. Firstly, enemy, then becomes a friend, and supposedly in the second half or the second act becomes sort of an enemy again. Now, because I'm going to be comparing these two films, The Wizard of Oz and Wicked, I will be referring to her as Galinda throughout the entire proceedings here. If I start using Glinda in both versions, we're going to get very confused, and I'm going to be even more confused. So Galinda, she will stay until the end of this presentation. We have Madame Morrible. She's the head teacher at Shiz University. And then the next person who turns up is Prince Fiero, the focus of a bit of a love triangle. Then we have Bock, who is a munchkin, quite enamoured of Galinda, and the wizard, who outs himself as being a bit of a fraud. By the way, not all of these characters and their colours are particularly relevant to this video. If you want me to do a full analysis of either of them, then please put it down in the notes below. But otherwise, I don't intend to follow those through. In this video, we're only going to be focusing specifically on the colours that pertain to Galinda and Elphaba from Wicked, and the colours pertaining to the Wicked Witch of the West, the Good Witch of the North, and also, to a lesser extent, Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. The relevant colours I'll be discussing from The Wizard of Oz are firstly blue, which is Dorothy's theme colour. She doesn't change her costume throughout the film, apart from the change in the colour of her shoes. Pink is Glinda's theme colour, and it also appears quite prominently for the Munchkins Lullaby League and the flora that we see in Munchkinland when Dorothy first arrives in Oz. Green pertains to the Wicked Witch of the West. It also is very prominent for the residents of the actual city of Oz, and Oz's buildings are all green, and the Wicked Witch of the West's guards are also green. There is a fourth colour, and that is black, which also links to the Wicked Witch of the West, but it plays a less prominent role. If we examine those same four colours in terms of how they appear in Wicked, Blue belongs to the Shiz University uniforms, and that's for both the faculty and also for the students. Specifically, Madame Morrible appears in blue, as does Dr. Dillamond, the history professor. Pink, like being Glinda's theme colour in The Wizard of Oz, Galinda's theme colour is pink here in Wicked. It has a highly exaggerated use and is also a flower that is given to Nessa Rose by her sister Elphaba to calm the child down when she's upset. Green is Elphaba's theme colour. There's also an important green potion bottle that plays its role within the film. And the residents of Oz, as for the Wizard of Oz themes, are also clad primarily in green. The monkey guard costumes or uniforms are also green, and the wizard himself appears in a green suit. Black is a colour primarily associated with Elphaba, but it's also rather common for Prince Fiero. But we won't be discussing his role in any great detail. So let's now move on to the purpose of the colour blue in The Wizard of Oz. It indicates Dorothy's protection of Toto. Blue is also seen as Dorothy accepts instructions from Glinda and also takes her orders from the wizard to go out and steal the Wicked Witch of the West's broomstick. A homesick and regretful Dorothy cries over the loss of her Auntie Em. And when she confronts the wizard at the end of the quest, she's still wearing that same blue, of course. The uniforms for the Wicked Witch of the West's guards and also the monkeys themselves are also in blue. And all of these indications of blue are about loyalty, about protection, about learning, and also about verbal confrontations. Blue's presence in Wicked is rather limited. Shiz is a place of learning. There are creation of factions, and there is also a burgeoning relationship between Elphaba and Fiero. Faculty ambitions are also uncovered as a result of the use of the colour blue. So in this instance, blue in Wicked represents conformity, loyalty, and the discovery of potential. Moving back now to pink. The purpose of pink in The Wizard of Oz is seen as Glinda's magical mode of travel. There is encouragement of the munchkins done by Glinda, and there is also benevolent oversight of the travellers. There is exposure to secrets that Glinda has withheld from Dorothy, and finally, an unconditional friendship offer that comes very early in the piece when the Lullaby League welcome Dorothy to Munchkinland. So pink here represents magic, it represents caring, reassurance, and also the offer of love. Pink's appearance in Wicked has a slightly different reading. Like Glinda's use of pink as a carriage device in The Wizard of Oz, Galinda also has a magical mode of transport that is a pink bubble. She has an expectation of success because of her past experience. There is an unconscious self-centeredness that makes its way very prominently into the beginning of the film. And there is rivalry when that self-centeredness remains unfulfilled. There is a bit of fake, friendly re-gifting of something that she wants to discard. And there is a trend-setting post-enlightenment once she's been informed that it was Elphaba's intervention that has created a space for her in the sorcery class. Following this, there's a fair amount of restitution and a charm offensive, which results in Galinda attempting to transform Elphaba into a version of herself by teaching her how to become popular through the use of pink. As a result of her overtures of friendship towards Elphaba, Galinda is invited along to visit the Wizard of Oz himself. However, once there, she begins to succumb to his authority and also to the authority of Professor Morrible. And eventually she finds herself unable to resist the restriction or restraint of the monkey guards who are preventing her from leaving Oz with Elphaba. So pink in this instance has all got to do with magic and charm, but at the same time also selfishness and an open-heartedness that is unusual for someone who is otherwise seen as fairly selfish. She's also extremely vulnerable, and all of those ideas are tied up in the use of pink. Green also has a specific reading in The Wizard of Oz, but here we have a dichotomy that occurs between the Wicked Witch of the West and the denizens of Oz itself. The Wicked Witch is depicted as an evil personified creation. She indulges in a great deal of scheming and surveillance as she watches Dorothy on her way to Oz, and she also has some gleeful revenge planned on Dorothy for not handing over the magic slippers. But on the other hand, Green also is associated with the Scarecrow, who is a rather helpful character. There is an unhelpful gatekeeper at Oz who's also in green, but that contrasts strongly with the joyful residents of the city of Oz itself, and contrasts again with the frightening visage of the wizard himself. Here, green is used to evoke fear, but also to evoke freedom. There are hidden agendas, and there are issues of trust that are all bound up with the use of the colour green. Contrast this with the purpose of green in the film Wicked. There is no dichotomy. Green is all about the creation of something strange. There is a dedication to goals. There is protection of the vulnerable. Nessa Rose is being protected from the bullies by her sister Elphaba. But this protection of her sister is also carried through to Shiz University, where Elphaba has been put in charge of her sister's welfare by her father and takes that role very seriously. Then we have Elphaba assisting Dr. Dillamore after he has been humiliated within one of his own lectures. And finally, Prince Fiero and Elphaba also rescue a lion cub and set it free in the forest. There is time also for some self-reflection, which surprisingly is done in a green mirror, which tends to exacerbate the feeling of green. Elphaba herself is a centered person. She doesn't really care about the opinions of other people around her. She knows what she wants and she knows how to obtain it. But there's also a potential here for fulfillment when she is invited to visit the wizard at Oz. Once there, of course, green is used to install awe and also helps to expose the truth of what is going on behind the curtain. There is shock from the monkeys as they grow their wings, and shattered dreams as Elphaba becomes aware of the reality of the wizard's intentions for Oz and its environment. And finally, she has to make a life choice. So, what does green tell us about its purpose in Wicked? Well, firstly, it says difference can be anything that you want it to be. And sometimes what appears to be negative can in fact be positive, and vice versa. There is steadfastness, there are personal values on display, and there's also a certain degree of disillusionment that happens when green appears. So let's now compare the two pink witches. They have a number of similarities, but there are also differences. The similarities are that they're both popular and they're both extremely friendly to those around them. Basically, they're kind. Even Galinda, who does not appear to be particularly kind at the beginning of the film, certainly has a kind streak within her. They're also thoughtful, although, once again, the thoughtfulness is not something apparent in Galinda as much as it is in Glinda. Nevertheless, both of them have those attributes. In terms of difference, well, the most obvious one is that Glinda is much older than Galinda, even though the two of them are supposedly fairly close in actual timelines of the stories themselves. Nevertheless, Glinda is seen as wise, whereas Galinda is seen as frivolous. Again, Glinda is strong, where Galinda is weak and vulnerable and basically fairly easily led, despite her appearance of self-assurance. When comparing the Green Witches, we also have similarities and differences. The similarities for the two women are that they are both outcasts and they are shunned by their peers. They're on a personal quest, but they maintain that quest by being true to themselves. They're fairly goal-oriented, and they're both very determined to achieve what they want to achieve. They're attached to a sibling. The Wicked Witch of the West is quite mournful and angry at the death of her sister, whereas Elphaba is extremely protective of her sister, Nessa Rose. And both of them refuse to be seen as victims. They are in charge of their own destiny. They make choices. In terms of differences, of course, it's very easy to see the dichotomies. There is the binary of evil and good. The Wicked Witch of the West is by definition evil, true and true, whereas Elphaba is a little harder to classify as evil, even though she has all of the stigmata of evil. She's coloured green and she wears black. But nevertheless, through her actions, we see that she is indeed a good character. The Wicked Witch of the West is rather vengeful in her activities, whereas Elphaba is quite compassionate. And similarly, the Wicked Witch of the West is duplicitous in all of her interactions with others, whereas Elphaba maintains a degree of honesty and integrity in everything that she does and everything that she interacts with others about. Whereas the Wicked Witch of the West has a hidden vulnerability, which we see at the end of the film The Wizard of Oz, where she is dissolved by the use of water, Elphaba, on the other hand, has a hidden strength. She appears as a far stronger and more capable character than the Wicked Witch of the West. So if Elphaba's story is a precursor for that of the Wicked Witch, then perhaps she loses a lot of that strength as time moves on. We won't find that out, though, until Act 2. There are, of course, a few other colours that are of importance to both films. And while these have a narrative focus, they're not the focus of this particular video because I don't have the room to put them in. We'd be here all day. Firstly, there are the ruby slippers. Then the Wicked Witch of the West uses red smoke to announce her arrival and also her departure from any scene. There is a red poppy field that is a problem for both the Cowardly Lion and Dorothy and also Toto to travel across. And of course, there is the famous yellow brick road that leads from Munchkinland all the way to the city of Oz. In Wicked, there are no ruby slippers. These slippers are silver, and that is in keeping with the original story. The colour of the slippers was changed by the producers of The Wizard of Oz because red was a far more vibrant colour to place on screen in this newfangled stuff called Technicolor. Professor Morrible has a brown robe when we first see her, and she's wearing a purple robe when she tells Galinda of Elphaba's ultimatum. Bock is clothed in orange, and Galinda's party dress, while appearing pink in some scenes, is actually a combination of both orange and pink. There are certain aspects of orange that indicate a crisis is about to ensue, and that is the case here for both of these characters. Nessa Rose wears a red trim to her dress as she's bidding her sister farewell, and Fiyero is also wearing red, this time in the form of a couple of poppies in his buttonhole. From his expression, we can see that he has mixed feelings about watching both of the women in his life leave. And finally, while the yellow brick road does not yet exist, the wizard is very proud of the prototype that he has set up in his castle and is demonstrating it to Elphaba and Galinda. Now, whilst all of these colours have some narrative input, they certainly are not necessary for this specific analysis. So we'll just leave them there. So let's now summarise the two films and the colours that appear with them. Blue and black have single-purpose readings. Blue relates to learning and discovery of information. Black equates to some form of hidden knowledge, skills, and motives of the people who are wearing them. Pink and green both have binary readings. That is, they have extremes of a particular type of characteristic. Pink exhibits both kindness and selfishness, whereas green, as the most complex of the colour readings, indicates being misunderstood and shunned, but it mainly epitomises the difference between good and evil. And all actions are empowered by strong beliefs and values. There are strong passions associated with the colour green in both films. And that brings us to the end of the colour comparison between The Wizard of Oz and Wicked. I hope that you've had some insight into the way in which the colours are used in these two films. Certainly, I was struck very much by the way in which pink and green, instead of being all love and all envy, turned out to be totally juxtaposed and at times even opposites to what we would normally see as a reading for these two colours in a film. I'd be very interested to hear what you think of those two films, and particularly the colours pink and green and how they are used within the films. But that's about it for this session. If you have any specific films you'd like me to analyse, please mention them down below. I'm more than happy to indulge you. Until next time, may the colours of your life bring you joy and happiness and everything that you desire. Bye.